Tanse, welcome to APTN National News. I'm Krisanachkite. Thank you for joining us. Indigenous children who were forced into group homes in Canada from the 1950s to the 1990s could be in line for compensation. First reported by the Canadian press, a claim filed in federal court this month in Vancouver says First Nation, Inuit and Métis children who were forcibly removed from their homes and put into group homes to live with strangers as part of Canada's assimilation policy. The children were subjected to verbal, physical, mental, and sexual abuse. The group homes were distinct from foster homes and residential schools, but they were operated by church groups and the Canadian government. The claim is seeking unspecified damages from the federal government for negligence and breaching its fiduciary duties to protect the children. The allegations remain unproven in court, and the federal government has yet to respond. A priest charged with sexual assault has had his charges stayed. Last year, RCMP charged Arul Savari with sexual assault, sexual exploitation, and forcible confinement. RCMP alleged Savari sexually assaulted an 8-year-old girl while he was working at a Catholic church on a First Nation. In the second day of the trial Wednesday, the Crown stayed the charges. RCMP previously reported that Savari had been in Canada for 6 years, worked in another remote First Nation, and lived in Winnipeg. Alberta RCMP have laid charges in connection with a human trafficking investigation that dates back 2 decades.
Police are getting better trained to recognize the indicators of human trafficking and utilizing our trauma-informed, victim-centered approach.
Mounties say they recently spoke to a woman who had met a local man on an online dating site in 2004. After a brief consensual relationship, the victim told police the man began to traffic her. The RCMP has discovered as many as 4 more adult victims were also involved. 47-year-old Darren Routhier has been arrested and is charged with human trafficking, receiving benefits from the trafficking of a person, sexual assault causing bodily harm, unlawful confinement, and extortion. The RCMP says they have successfully disrupted proxies of Mexican cartels from setting up shop in British Columbia following the arrest of 3 men in Surrey.
They are looking at BC as a market, and we've been thus far successful in preventing them from obtaining a foothold here, and clearly there isn't a lot of presence that at least we're seeing at the moment.
Investigators also seized firearms, several thousand rounds of ammunition, illicit drugs, and law enforcement apparel. The 3 suspects were allegedly involved in importing cocaine to Canada. 1 man is a Mexican national. The other 2 are Canadian citizens. All 3 have since been released. Police are recommending drug and firearm-related charges. The sexual assault trial involving 5 former World Junior Canadian hockey players is set to get underway in the spring. The case will start on April 22nd and is expected to last 8 weeks. The players are charged with sexual assault after allegations from an encounter at an Ontario hotel in June of 2018. More pretrial motions are still expected to be held in the case. The matter will be back in court later this month. Donald Trump was re-elected as President of the United States last week, but that's unwelcome news for the Gwich'in in northern Yukon, who say a sacred caribou calving ground is now under threat. Sarah Connors has more.
For the Gwich'in in Alaska and Canada, the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge's coastal plain in the northeastern part of the state is the sacred place where life begins. The 1.5 million acre plain is the calving grounds of the porcupine caribou herd, a major food source for the Gwich'in. But Donald Trump's re-election could have major implications for the refuge, the caribou, and for the Gwich'in. That's because Trump wants to open the refuge up to oil and gas drilling. That's bad news for the Vuntut Gwich'in in northern Yukon. The First Nations said in a written statement, oil and gas development in the coastal plain is an existential threat to the porcupine caribou and to our Gwich'in way of life. And for millennia, the porcupine caribou have provided us with all we need to survive and thrive in our northern homeland. We will not abandon them now when they need us most. It's not the first time Trump has eyed the area for oil and gas development. During the last days of his first administration, the Bureau of Land Management auctioned off more than 500,000 acres of the refuge. But thanks to mounting public pressure, major U.S. and Canadian banks said they wouldn't fund drilling in the refuge, and the sale was a flop. President Joe Biden's administration canceled the few remaining leases last year, but Trump pledged to undo those efforts if reelected.
We were certainly disappointed. This is not the election that we wanted to see.
Trump's reelection is disappointing news for this environmental nonprofit, especially as a second mandated lease sale is set to take place in the coming weeks. But Kristen Miller of the Alaskan Wilderness League says much like the first sale, the upcoming sale isn't expected to attract much interest. A final environmental statement for the refuge will also help ensure better protections are in place.
So we are very much hoping to see President Biden leave term with no leases held on the coastal plain.
Just hours after Trump's reelection, the Biden administration indicated it will lease only 400,000 acres of the refuge, the legal minimum. That sale must take place before December 22nd. Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
The Union of BC Indian Chiefs have sent a letter to the Council of 5 different municipalities across BC who have denied the harms of residential schools and unmarked graves to stop spreading misinformation. APTN's Tina House traveled to one of those communities and has this story.
It all began in January of this year when Sechelt District Mayor John Henderson brought this book called Grave Error, a book that denies unmarked graves, into City Hall and shared it with senior staffers. Mayor Henderson declined APTN's request for an interview, but Deputy Mayor Brenda Rowe agreed to address the issue.
We don't feel that that was an appropriate action. This is not about freedom of speech or the right to read. This is not about book banning. This is about being in a position of leadership in our community where our neighbor that we are 1 kilometer away from is Sechelt First Nation. And we just don't see that as part of a leadership role.
The Union of BC Indian Chiefs recently passed Resolution 2024-33, Rejection of Residential School Denialism, calling on not just the municipality of Sechelt, but also the municipalities of Powell River, Quesnel, West Vancouver, and Kamloops to advance policies that acknowledge and take responsibility for the history and harmful legacy of residential schools and support healing for survivors. UBCIC also stated they want Mayor Henderson and other mayors who deny the unmarked graves to step down immediately.
Generally speaking, from the council members' perspective, our resolution was embraced, it was supported. However, on the mayor's side, generally speaking, Quesnel, I believe the mayor walked out of the room. They simply would not walk back their comments. And in my opinion, that's an appalling failure of leadership.
And in Sechelt, every city councillor voted in favor of the resolution, except Mayor Henderson, who also refuses to do any land acknowledgements before any events or meetings. For Sechelt Chief Lenora Joe, she says her community members are hurt by his actions, and their self-governing council will no longer have any more direct dialogue with him.
The impact that it's had on our community, on our children, it's very real. And to have, we would never denounce the Holocaust. We wouldn't say that didn't happen. We wouldn't say that's fake. And so I don't understand why we have some mayors taking that stand. I don't understand it.
The mayors in question have all refused to step down. Tina House, APTN National News, Sechelt.
Now to BC, where former Premier John Horgan lost his battle with cancer on Tuesday at the age of 65. Condolences are pouring in from across the country for a man respected by all parties in the halls of power. John Joseph Horgan was first elected as an MLA for the Langford-Juan de Fuca riding in 2005. In 2014, he became the leader of the BC New Democratic Party. And then in 2017, he became the 36th Premier of British Columbia until he stepped down in 2022 due to health reasons. Horgan was instrumental in getting the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act implemented, making BC the first to adopt UNDRIP into law in Canada. This was Horgan's third time battling cancer. He leaves behind his wife Ellie and their 2 sons. After moving back home to their newly formed First Nation in Caldwell First Nation, some residents are facing the possibility of eviction. That story when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back. 3 residents in the Caldwell First Nation in Ontario may be facing eviction over installing doorbell cameras on their homes. Residents started moving to the reserve in the late summer after new homes were built for its residents. CTV's Chris Campbell has more.
It's been horrible.
What was supposed to be a perfect homecoming, returning to ancestral lands with a spiritual and cultural significance, has become a war of neighbors. Some Caldwell First Nation residents say they are facing eviction just months after moving on to the new reserve.
We all moved home. This is what it was supposed to be. We were all coming out. And I can tell you this much, in my opinion, this does not feel like home.
Marianne Kenny says everything inside the new net zero home is still ideal, but outside felt the need to install security cameras. This footage obtained by CTV News shows masked people lingering on other people's property more than a week before Halloween.
I would like to feel safe. Okay? When we put the cameras up, we felt safer. Right? But now we're being told that it's all going to get taken away from us.
When the cameras first went up, residents say the housing manager for Caldwell First Nations issued notices saying tenancy agreements had been breached, along with the home's structural integrity. The cameras had to come down and the homes repaired. A second notice received Friday says the cameras have to come down within 15 days or the residents face eviction.
Sending out notices like this without consultation, and it's a slap in the face to us who moved home.
Veteran and former Caldwell councillor Douglas Heil is in the process of moving in, but says he and his family are waiting to see if they'll get kicked out first. They also installed a doorbell security cam on their new home.
This was supposed to be so much happiness, and what have we got?
When a non-native starts putting up cameras all over the reserve, no, that should have been a native person doing it, not non-native.
Others say they feel more unsafe since the cameras went up, believing security cameras are an invasion of privacy.
People don't want to come visit us because they're being recorded. Like, people in other cities are watching us. Like, these are live feeds.
I could understand if we lived in, a normal neighborhood, because before I moved here, I did have cameras, but my cameras aren't up here. I never felt a need for them.
CTV News reached out to Caldwell First Nation for an interview, but did not receive a response as of news time.
I just want to feel safe in my own home, in my own yard.
Yeah.
That's all I want.
Chris Campbell, CTV News.
A Calgary company says its new mobile rain tower can protect valuable infrastructure from wildfires. It held its first live demonstration on the Enoch Cree Nation near Edmonton. Here's APTN's Chris Stewart with more.
This 100-foot-tall tower is capable of throwing 4,000 liters of water a minute over a large area to prevent damage from large wildfires. The Enoch Cree Nation hosted Wildfire Innovations Rainstream Mobile Tower for a test run. Firefighters from nearby communities were here to see how this unit can protect infrastructure before and during a wildfire.
When you have a whole bunch of these together, it can create 10 millimeters of rainfall in under 2 hours over a huge area. The key is that this covers between 4 and 7 hectares, or it covers between 10 and 20 acres for each tower, right? So when you have a whole bunch of these together, they can protect a huge area over towns and communities.
Don Hallett created the unit. It can be hauled with a large capacity pickup truck and set up in 20 minutes. Hallett says it fits in perfectly with traditional firefighting methods. He did not give a cost, but says it is much better than the alternative, losing everything to fire.
I recognize that the aerial are strapped and doing the best they can to fight fires, and then with the ground system, so I thought we need something in between that maybe would reach a lot farther to protect the larger area, and that's why I've come up with this. It's sort of the close the gap in between what's on the ground and what's in the air.
And the rain stream did not disappoint. This reporter was the only media member who walked into the middle of the downpour, and it felt like a heavy rain. Puddles quickly formed, and the trees were soaked. While most leaders from Enoch were watching from their nearby hotel, Councillor Shane Peacock watched firsthand how effective the unit is.
This is awesome. This is an opportunity to new innovation that's come out from Rainstream and wildfire. It's something that I've looked and thought of often here, especially in Alberta, especially for our small community of Enoch Cree Nation, of how we can protect ourselves better.
Councillor Peacock feels Enoch should buy one or more of these towers. He hopes other communities will look into this new technology as well.
We live in a different climate, different world right now. Alberta, we've seen it, we've got a history. More importantly, we need to take better care of our lands, and this is one way of doing it. It's being preemptive, and that's one thing we've learned in the past, and one thing that us here in Enoch would like to help promote.
Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Enoch, Cree Nation, Alberta.
Now to a dramatic video of a bear encounter in Whistler, BC that is going viral, showing a man getting dangerously close to the animal. The bear was spotted wandering around Whistler Village with several people nearby. Some tried to scare it away while others tried to capture the encounter on video. The video posted on TikTok has more than 900,000 views so far. Experts say if you do encounter a bear, leave the area quietly and go back the way you came. We now want to tell you about this week's web poll question. Over on our website, we ask, do you think the passing of Honourable Murray Sinclair will impact the ongoing reconciliation efforts in Canada? Your answers are yes, significantly, yes, somewhat, no, or unsure. Have your say on our website at www.aptnnews.ca. There is a new toolkit that can help with Indigenous language revitalization. That story when we come back. Starting on the east, Charlottetown 1, Fredericton -4. Nujuak 3, Nain 0. Montreal +1, Quebec City 2. Peterborough 5, Sault Ste. Marie 7 in Sun. 2 in Sudbury, Sioux Lookout 2 as well. 0 in God's Lake, The Paw -1. 3 in Gimli, Dauphin 0. 4 in Regina, Saskatoon 2. La Ronge -2, Meadow Lake -2. Fort McMurray -5 in Snow, Peace River -3. 7 in Medicine Hat, Calgary 9. 10 in Vancouver, Kamloops sunny and 10. Prince George 5, Smithers 3. -2 in Whitehorse, Mayo -10. Wati -14, Wrigley -14. -13 in Colville Lake, Inuvik -18. Cambridge Bay -6, Chesterfield -7. And Clyde River -9, Iqaluit 0. A new permanent installation of Indigenous art is now greeting visitors at the front entrance of the Cambrian College in Sudbury. It was created by a former student, Cody Bradshaw, who graduated from Cambrian's Welding and Fabrication Technician program. The installation includes a metal medicine wheel, along with images of 4 animals that are considered sacred in Indigenous culture. Bradshaw says that the sacred animals, as well as the directions, elements, and colors within the medicine wheel, pay respects to the Indigenous teachings that are relevant to this Anishinaabe region. Bradshaw spent close to 100 hours on the project. The Canadian Commission for UNESCO has released a new toolkit to make Indigenous language revitalization more accessible. The free toolkit, titled Safeguarding Your Language Through Documentation, is geared toward people who want to document an Indigenous language but lack formal training. The 44-page document is written by Ayana Twig, a member of the Ktunaxa Nation in British Columbia, who has been working to revitalize her language since 2018. It includes an overview of the equipment, strategies, and ethical considerations to begin documenting an Indigenous language. The project is part of the Council's efforts to support the United Nations International Decade of Indigenous Languages, which began in 2022. Project coordinator Barbara Filion shared a look inside the toolkit and how the resource will benefit communities.
We know that there are some pretty dire statistics out there for Indigenous languages. And if you want to take an active role in your community, you know some speakers, whether it's in your community or in an urban Indigenous community, you know some speakers, you'd like to record them, then you can do that. You can grab the toolkit, and there's a lot of tips and techniques on how to record, like a lot of technical stuff, but then there's also ideas about how to elicit conversation, how to save your work. There's ethical considerations, there's some consent forms that you can use, some wording. So it really gives you a general overview of what you need to think about to get started.
3 Indigenous writers have been announced as winners of the prestigious Governor General Literary Awards. The awards play an important role in the recognition of a diverse and unique literary landscape in Canada. Winners in each of the 7 categories are also awarded $25,000 each. Our Truth in Politics panelist Negon Sinclair is among the winners. His Winnipeg Visions of Canada from an Indigenous Centre took home the Governor General Award for nonfiction. Niska's writer Jordan Abel's Empty Spaces won in the fiction category, and Métis playwright Kaylee Crow won in the drama category for There is Violence and There is Righteous Violence and There is Death or the Born Again Crow. And while we're discussing awards, our colleagues at Nation to Nation have been nominated in the Outstanding Indigenous Series category at the 7th Annual Canadian Podcast Awards. The winners will be announced in early December. Congrats to everyone. Now here's Kenneth Jackson in Ottawa to give us a preview of what's coming up on this evening's Nation to Nation.
Big city drug dealers are infiltrating small First Nations north of Toronto in the Robinson-Huron Treaty Territory. Police have made bust after bust, yet these dealers and their deadly drugs just keep coming. But one First Nation has found a historic way to remove them from their community. We'll talk to them and their lawyer. He lays out how others can do it too. We also speak to a chief who says these dealers are profiting off trauma and killing people along the way. It's another form of genocide, says Chief Adam Pavis of Shawanaga First Nation. All is coming up tonight on Nation to Nation.
Thank you, Ken. And that's your midday newscast for this Thursday, November 14th. Dennis Ward is back for your evening newscast. Make sure to join us then. He has more brand new stories for today. From everyone at APTN National News and from our reporting staff from across the country, hi, miigwech, masicho. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again. Ekse.